Welcome back, and we're on to day 2. I won't repeat everything I said yesterday, it's on the screen, but we're on to the second part and the slightly harder question, so the end of the first 15, which are considered more straightforward. And as ever, please pause video, have a go at the question. I recommend, and again this is really a guideline, so 2 minutes per question maximum, definitely not more than 3, because then you'll run out of time for the end of the questions. Let's go. So first question coming up in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so a difficult question in the sense you probably have to read it a couple of times just to see what it's actually asking. And so if we think about, as ever, the number that we want as being x, well, it's saying a quarter of x is 9 more than what I started with. And actually that's just an equation. So if I write down an equation, so x equals a quarter x minus 9 to get back to where I started, I can solve equations, so multiply everything by 4, move x to the side, divide by 3, and that's going to give you x equals minus 12. Feels like the wrong number, but it is indeed one of the answers, and if you try it out, it does work. So the first question is going to be answer E. Next question coming up in 3, 2, 1. All right, so a nice little question involving similar shapes, and because it's got right angles, it's probably a Pythagoras question. Remember again, this is non-calculator, so none of the numbers here are going to be too difficult. So the way to approach this, obviously I have a huge advantage in that I have the diagram, so I can repeat the diagram. So first of all, I've got similar shapes, and that matters because that means all the triangles, as is the bottom left one, are isosceles, which means I can use Pythagoras to work out the length of the hypotenuse for the smallest side, so that's 2 squared plus 2 squared square rooted, which is 8. I'm going to leave it like as 8 as opposed to 2 root 2 because I'm going to need that number later. So therefore I can add that to my diagram, and then I can work out the length of the hypotenuse of the middle triangle. So root 8 squared plus root 8 squared is root 16, which is 4. And now, always keep your eye on what you're trying to do. So you don't need to work out the hypotenuse of the large triangle because you're working out the area. The area of triangles is a half height times the perpendicular base. So the first triangle is going to be 2 times 2 times a half. Next triangle is a half times root 8 times root 8. And the next triangle is going to be a half times 4 times 4. Add all those up carefully. 2 plus 4 plus 8, thirds go away, and that just leaves me with a nice round 14. 14 is indeed one of the answers. It's answer A. So that's the next question done. Next question coming up in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this links to some of the proof work we do at GCSE. So at GCSE, the proof work is fairly basic. It doesn't get harder until A level, but equally the setup can help us here. So what do I have? So I have 3 consecutive integers. So if I let those integers be n minus 1, n plus 1, well, I can write down the product as I've done here. So just multiply them all together. The sum of those numbers is going to be n minus 1 plus n plus n plus 1. And from the question, it tells me that these two things are equal. And as a couple of questions ago, I've got an equation. I can solve equations, so that's not too bad. The key to this question is I need to be careful about one step. So let's run through. So expand the left-hand side and collect on the right-hand side. And that gives me n cubed minus n equals 3n, which is n cubed minus 4n equals 0. Now, a common error here is to divide by n, but n equals 0 is a solution, or at least is a solution I need to try. So I factorize it down to n squared minus 4, difference of 2 squares, and that means my solutions are n equals 0 minus 2 and 2. So again, let's be clear what I'm doing here. If I let n equals 0, which gives me the numbers minus 1, 0 and 1, those will solve the requirement of the question. So it's always worthwhile, especially if you've got a 30 seconds or so free, just try those values. So as I said, n equals 0 gives me minus 1, 0 and 1. They add to make 0, multiply to make 0, so that works. Minus 2 gives me minus 3, minus 2, minus 1. Again, those two numbers work, and 1, 2 and 3, same thing. All 3 numbers work. The answer to the question is C. There are 3 values of n which solve the equation. Next question coming up in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I don't like these questions, but actually this one's not too bad because you can do a lot of it by basically proof by error. In other words, you show that something isn't true, which means the entire sentence isn't true. The other thing you can do is just put some numbers in. So I'm going to choose 12 as my number to put in. And the reason I'm doing that is because it divides by 2, divides by 3, divides by 4, and that might be something helpful. So if we then run through the options quickly. So the bottom row contains at least one 0. Well, that doesn't have to be the case because I could put all 6s in the bottom row given my 12 that I've decided to use. So it's definitely not A. B says the third row contains at least 1 0. Well, we know that's not true because 12 and 12 give me 24 in both cases. That's just not true. C and D, well, they both can't be correct. So let's try using the maths we've done before. So instead of 12, because the problem with 12 is it already divides by 3 and 4, is I'm going to choose X. So if I let those numbers be X, then the third row, well, the top left one is going to be X plus X, and the right one is going to be X plus X as well. So therefore my third row is going to be X plus X, adding together plus X, which is 4X, which doesn't divide by 3, but it does divide by 4, so therefore D is correct. E by definition is wrong, so my answer is going to be D. Not too bad compared to some of those they tend to ask in this competition. Next and final question before we get to the notably harder ones is coming up in 3, 2, 1. All right, so not an awful question. This is where a diagram or a quick sketch can really help you make sure you understand what's been asked here, because on the face of it, it could be very tricky if you're not sure what you're looking for. So what I've done is I've done a quick sketch. So the 2 X's on the blue line are my rough estimates, my points 1, -1 and 5, 3. And if I have a mirror line, because it's a reflection, well, the mirror must be at a right angle, because as we know, otherwise it will come off at an angle and it won't go straight through. So it must be the case that actually this is just a question about a perpendicular bisector. So therefore, in order to work out the perpendicular bisector of the 2 points I'm given, well, the 2 things I need are the gradient and the midpoint. Well, the gradient's quite easy because I'm going down 4 and across 4, so therefore the gradient is 1. And again, just look at my graph. It looks like it's 1 very roughly when I've done my sketch. So that seems reasonable. The perpendicular gradient of the red line is therefore -1. So I've got my gradient. The C term, well, I need to know what point it goes through. So my midpoint is going to be 5 plus 1 divided by 2 and -1 plus 3 divided by 2. In other words, the average of the X and the average of the Y. That gives me 3, 1. So I've got my midpoint, I've got my gradient. What line goes through that point? The answer is Y equals -X plus 4. Is that up here? Well, it's written in a slightly different format, but indeed E is the answer to my question. And that is the final 5 of the arguably easiest starting 15 before it gets a bit more interesting tomorrow. So come back tomorrow. As ever, do like and subscribe to the video. Any comments down below, anything you think I've done wrong, please ask down below. I'll reply to you. And again, come back tomorrow when it starts to jump a little bit in terms of difficulty. As I say, this is a quiz designed for 13 and above. Really, you tend to be 15-ish when you take it, but either way, how did you do? Thanks all.